As President Trump escalated his rhetoric on the Ukraine war yesterday, falsely claiming that President Volodymyr Zelensky is a dictator. It came in a long post on Truth Social yesterday morning that included a number of inaccuracies. Then last night, Trump essentially repeated the post while speaking at an event in Miami.
A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. And you can't bring a war to an end if you don't talk to both sides. You got to talk. They haven't been talking for 3 years.
This turn on Ukraine, of course, has a history. We all remember 2019, where Trump wanted Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate Hunter Biden, get dirt on Joe Biden, basically trying to shake down a foreign leader for dirt on a political rival. And he was withholding military aid. I think it was about $400 million back then. So this, in some ways, is not shocking, but the turning on a country that is fighting for its survival and fighting for peace for the rest of the world and fighting against oppression, for a lot of people who love this democracy, that hurts to hear. On Capitol Hill, some Republicans were critical of the overall message of Trump's comments to Russia, but most, they just stopped short of actually criticizing the president.
Would you call Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator, as President Trump has?
Well, I like I said, the president speaks for himself.
I do not agree that President Zelensky is to blame in any way.
Can you talk? Thank you, guys. President Trump has weighed in that
invasion by Russia.
I absolutely would not say that Zelensky started the war. It is quite clear who started the war. It was absolutely Russia at Putin's directive. I don't think that there should be any confusion with that.
To the extent that the White House said that Ukraine started the war, I disagree. I think Vladimir Putin started the war. I also believe through bitter experience that Vladimir Putin is a gangster. He's a gangster with a black heart. He makes Jeffrey Dahmer look like Mother Teresa. He has Stalin's taste for blood. And as I've said in another context, I trust this guy like I trust gas stations sushi.
But make no mistake about it, that invasion was the responsibility of one human being on the face of this planet. It was Vladimir Putin, in a calculation to go through Ukraine and not stop there, to go through Moldova, to go through the Balkans, to ultimately go to the Baltic states and send the signal to China that now is the time that they can take action in the South China Sea. That's what this is about, and that's what we as members have to communicate.
Calling him a dictator, he called him a dictator.
I didn't hear that. I'll let other people use their words. It's not a word I would have used.
I used to be a divorce lawyer, and I did it for about a year. The last thing you do is you get the antagonistic couples in the room at the end, not the beginning. I am okay with talking with Russia about where's your headspace, and relaying that to the Ukrainians. There will be no deal without Ukraine being consulted and on board, because it won't work. I talked to Zelensky today. Nobody is going to do anything that you're not involved with. But talking to the Russians separately, I'm actually okay with that. Then go back to Ukraine and see what they think and keep working. At the end, you got to get both parties into the room.
Do you think that Putin can be trusted in these negotiations?
No. Putin is a war criminal and should be in jail for the rest of his life, if not executed.
Okay, that last comment from Republican Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi was from on Tuesday, before Trump called Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator. Trump is also facing criticism from two of his former 2024 primary rivals. Look at this. Former Vice President Mike Pence wrote in a social media post, quote, "Mr. President, Ukraine did not start this war. The road to peace must be built on the truth." And former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said, quote, "These are classic Russian talking points, exactly what Putin wants." So, David Ignatius, here we are again. It only gets worse. And while really consequential to hear this president turning on Ukraine, when you look at the pattern of his behavior with Ukraine, I guess it's not surprising. It's also a huge distraction from the breakdown of the federal government that is happening in unlawful ways, as well as the controversial nominees that are getting basically, corralled right through the Senate and out into their positions with seemingly very little pushback or questions to some really scary concepts that they bring along with them.
So one striking thing to me, Mika, is that Republicans finally seem to have found their voice in directly, clearly disagreeing with Donald Trump in his criticism of Zelensky and this absurd claim that Ukraine started the war. That seems to have blown a circuit for the Republicans, and it's about time. The concern I'm hearing from strategists, from military people who follow this, is this negotiation heading into a sort of rough accommodation between the United States and Russia, two big guys who are going to figure out how they resume their relationship, and then a decision by Europe whether Europe stands with Ukraine and Europe provides the defense going forward. And if Zelensky is really left out of the picture by Trump, and watching his comments, you wonder if that's not where we're heading. Will Europe step up? It's 6 months ago, it would have been impossible, 3 months ago, a month ago, to imagine anything like this. But this has become so personal for Trump. You need to really think, why? What is it? Where does this animus towards Volodymyr Zelensky come from? He treats him like a little man. He calls him a comedian. He's like he's a secondary player with contempt. I thought the tweet yesterday was snide. It was just a gratuitous piling on. And he continued with the speech last night. So I just know where we seem to be heading right now is an accommodation between the U.S. and Russia, and then a European decision to stand with Zelensky. And that would mean a break, not only with Zelensky, but a real break between the United States and Europe. That's the danger of the moment.
And I think David's right how personal this is. First of all, modestly successful comedian was the language that Trump used in his Truth Social post yesterday. Of course, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. And to Mika's point, I think some of this does stem from Trump's first impeachment in 2019 when Trump had enlisted Rudy Giuliani and others to try to get dirt on the Biden family. He thought Biden would be his likely opponent in 2020. He was right about that. Going over to Ukraine, trying to find dirt about them there. Zelensky did not cooperate. As Mika said, withheld the military aid that led to an impeachment. And we know that there's a personal dimension to this between Trump and Putin as well. He's always been deferential to Putin. He has lavished praise upon him even before he entered politics, and certainly afterwards. We know how deferential he was in Helsinki. He continues to be to this day. And you're right. Republicans were critical of what he said, but they still weren't critical of Trump. They don't ever go after Trump himself, not yet. But this does feel like it is a moment in this conflict. The Ukrainians and the officials there, I've talked the last couple of days, David, I'm sure you have as well, are deeply alarmed that they're being abandoned here by the United States, their biggest partner and ally, where it seems like, at least in some degrees, Washington leaning towards Moscow now in this conflict. The Wall Street Journal adds their voice to this. Their editorial board continues its criticism of Trump's handling of Ukraine with a new piece titled "Trump Tilts Toward a Ukraine Sellout." It reads in part this: the U.S. has a profound interest in denying Mr. Putin a new perch on more of the NATO border, which is the real reason America has been right to arm Ukraine. A deal that amounts to Ukrainian surrender will be a blow to American power that will radiate to the Pacific and the Middle East. It would be the opposite of Mr. Trump's promise to restore a golden age of U.S. prestige and world calm. Last week, Mr. Trump said Ukraine can't join NATO and must give up much of its territory to Russia. Concessions to Mr. Putin with nothing in return. Mr. Putin's response this week has been more drone attacks on Ukraine. And here we thought Mr. Trump doesn't like being played. The better strategy than beating up Ukraine is making clear to Mr. Putin the arms and pressure he'll face if the Russian doesn't wind down the war to accept a durable peace. As it stands now, they go on, Mr. Trump's seeming desperation for a deal is a risk to Ukraine, Europe, U.S. interests, and his own presidency. And Caddy, I mean, it's spelled out very well there. For so long, as we talked about yesterday on the show, the Republican Party, the party of Reagan, of H.W. Bush, the Cold Warriors, that was part of their whole orthodoxy. And now Trump has abandoned that and seemingly on the verge of rewarding Putin for this illegal war, asking very little in return. For the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal, there seems to be no real negotiations going on here. He's giving away the shop before talks even start. And it's one that could fundamentally reshape Europe, not just now, but potentially set up Putin on a path for more going forward.
Yeah, first of all, it's very interesting that the criticism of Donald Trump's policies at the moment is coming as much from the Wall Street Journal as it is from anywhere else. It's worth watching that. Obviously, there are things the Journal likes about what Trump is doing, but this in particular, they don't. The people who cover Russia and Ukraine much more closely than I do are surprised by the degree to which Donald Trump has already played his cards.
Yeah.
And once you've put all of your cards on the table, you don't have very much left. So they say Donald Trump is in a weak negotiating position now. He's put himself into that weak negotiation position. The Russians, in contrast, are wheeling out some very skilled negotiators. My understanding is that the people that were in Saudi Arabia are much more proficient in negotiating than those who have tried to negotiate before, and more skilled in negotiating on Russia, Ukraine, and this particular area than any of the Americans who were sent. Now, was that by design? Did the Americans go in order to be rolled over? The speed with which this has happened has left Europeans scrambling.
Yeah.
There is an opportunity for Europe to step up. They have the money to do so. They could fund at least the holding of a defensive line. But that Paris meeting led to no unity. And that's the problem.